Welcome to Across Africa, France 24's weekly roundup from across the continent. Coming up this week, France announced the end of its Sangaris peacekeeping mission in Central African Republic, declaring that a page has been turned on the country's troubles, even as sectarian clashes continued. Also, Cameroon's president has promised 500,000 students their own computer. It's an expensive scheme that's welcomed by pupils, but not so much by economists or local computer dealerships who wonder why the hardware is coming from China. And the show of the century and Africa is, of course, tuned in. As the countdown to the end of the US election draws ever closer, we take a look at what the outcome of the race for the White House could mean for the African continent. But first, France's defense minister announced on Monday that a page had been turned for Central African Republic. This as he officially ended his country's peacekeeping mission in the African nation. But even as France announced the end of the military deployment it began 3 years ago, more fatal clashes are reported in the Central African capital.
Sangaris, France's 7th military mission in the Central African Republic since its independence in 1960, officially ended on Monday. The French defense minister said the army had finished the job it had come to do.
This mission had 3 objectives. First, to stop mass killings. Then, to enable the establishment of democratic process. And finally, to complete a handover from the Sangaris military force to the United Nations. We have accomplished these 3 goals.
Some French troops will remain in the country. At the height of the crisis, there were more than 2,000 soldiers. By the end of the year, they will be less than 300. Some of them will integrate the UN mission, MINUSCA. France launched the mission in December 2013. Back then, there were clashes between the former Seleka rebels and the anti-Balaka militiamen. Thousands of people were killed. Today, there is still sporadic violence across the country. In the PK5 district in Bangui, some regret France's decision.
We are very worried. They were here for 3 years, they helped, they made us feel safe. This decision is shocking. We want Sangaris to stay.
The UN troops work, but not as much as the French ones. The French come by every day, they laugh with us, but the UN troops often stay in their headquarters, whereas the French carry out patrols every day.
The presence of French and UN troops enabled the organization of a presidential election earlier this year. It was won by Faustin Archange Touadéra. French and UN soldiers have also been accused of sexual abuse in the country. French judges are investigating the allegations.
Ahead of the COP22 international climate talks next week, Tangiers is jumping in on the act and getting a makeover. More than 200 countries are sending delegations to Marrakesh on Monday to move forward with tackling global environmental challenges. Communities from around Morocco are already showing the spirit of the conference.
Narrow streets decked with flowers and facades painted in bright Mediterranean colors. This is the neighborhood of Bir Shifa in Tangiers, northern Morocco's major port city. Ahead of the COP22 climate conference taking place in the kingdom, residents from 13 neighborhoods have given a facelift to their city's streets.
It's the will of local residents that's behind this initiative, without any intervention from political parties or associations. It was a project launched by ordinary citizens from the neighborhood.
Seen from the heights of the city, the old town looks starved of green spaces. To break the monotony of their concrete blocks and to counter rampant urbanization, residents have funded this colorful renovation out of their own pockets. But activists say these small initiatives are not enough to fix the city's real problems.
This initiative is a real plus, but it's not enough because the city of Tangier has other environmental problems, such as pollution in industrial areas, particularly in areas close to our neighborhoods.
In February, 4 of the city's neighborhoods won a national prize rewarding their improvement. This also helped draw attention to these often marginalized areas.
The best part about all this is that after the prizes were awarded, the spirit endured and spread nationwide. We now find similar initiatives in other Moroccan cities, not just in Tangier's neighborhoods.
A gateway between Europe and Africa, Tangier has long suffered from neglect, plagued by smuggling and unemployment. 3 years ago, King Mohammed VI announced a 4-year urban development program for the city worth $1 billion. In the meantime, its residents have taken matters into their own hands to give their home a new lease on life.
Cameroon's president has promised 500,000 students their own computer. It's an expensive scheme that, though welcomed by pupils, is not going down well with economists.
On Yaoundé's Hill of Knowledge, as it's known here, sits the country's oldest university. Of the 50,000 students on roll, only a handful own personal computers. This situation may soon change, as all the students are expecting free laptops following a decision of the President of Cameroon. Lorna is an undergraduate language student. She's impatiently expecting this presidential gift.
This is good news for us because as students we are struggling. We support each other. Some students have computers and we share them. It's difficult. Sometimes when you can't find a student with a computer, you have to go to an internet cafe, and it's expensive.
In order to provide some 500,000 computers, the government will have to contract a 75 billion CFA francs loan from a Chinese bank. This decision has not gone down well with economists.
If the loan had been meant to set up an assembly plant in Cameroon, it would have been a very, very good idea, because it would have created jobs and there would have been more economic activity in our country.
Buying computers on credit from China rather than from local dealers is a bitter pill to Cameroonian traders, as they see this lucrative deal slipping through their fingers.
75 billion CFA is a lot of money. Imagine if 75 local vendors were selected through a bidding process. That way they would have each got $1 million turnover.
Back in the amphitheatres, the date of distribution of these 500,000 laptops is still a mystery, and students have no option but to rely on cyber cafes.
In a bid to clean up the city, authorities in Addis Ababa plan on moving poorer residents out from neighbourhoods earmarked for development and into social housing. The new condominiums they'll be offered will be subsidised, but many fear that they still won't be able to afford the cost of change.
This neighbourhood in Addis Ababa has been singled out as the Ethiopian capital's new business centre. But as the high-rise buildings go up, people in the slums are forced out. Residents like Getnesh Amari, who only pay around $1 a month in rent, have so far resisted the move.
They've come many times to force us to move quickly. I'm not happy, but it's a must. I have to move.
People from the slums will be rehoused in high-rise flats known as condominiums. It's part of a wider project to clean up Addis Ababa.
We have to create enough green areas. We have to create, good roads for the people. So, as a seat of African Union, our vision is, to create a modern city.
But modernity comes at a price. Although the condos are subsidised, the poorest still have to pay 10% of the cost, between $5,000 and $25,000. If they can't afford the repayments, they simply have to sell the condo and live elsewhere.
For those who can afford it, you can have a good life here with all the facilities. But for people who don't have the money, it's difficult.
The government's goal is to build 700,000 apartments in the next 5 years to create a middle class of property owners. But in the process, poorest residents could be left homeless, out of sight of Addis's high-rise apartment blocks.
Now, Africa, like the rest of the world, is watching the twists and turns of the US presidential race as its end grows ever closer. Hillary Clinton or Donald Trump. Whoever wins will likely make all the difference in the continent's relations with Washington. Our Philip Crowther's taken a closer look at what, if any, Africa policy the rivals have.
We are literally just a few meters away from the US State Department. The Africa for Hillary coalition wants to amass support among the African diaspora in the US.
So she's been involved in Africa, but we do support her, or at least some of us support her. And we think that she's the best candidate for the job.
Hillary Clinton has establishment support in Washington. That includes her advisors on Africa, former ambassadors, and administration officials.
We can't even compare both candidates. Donald Trump has no record on Africa. Trump's record on Africa is him saying that all the African leaders are all corrupt. They have children, they have multiple wives and things like that. Nothing of substance.
This is a confident group already preparing for a Clinton White House. But what if Trump gets in? Khadija Robinson is one of very few to have looked into that possibility.
How Donald Trump may address trade issues with Africa. Donald Trump has indicated that his presidency would be much more insular and that he would focus more on the U.S. Donald Trump as president would probably significantly reduce aid, outward aid, and possibly even military presence.
Absent any concrete Africa policy from either candidate, the campaign advisors have to fill in the blanks. Here, Joseph Schmitz is representing Trump on Al Hurra, which broadcasts in North Africa.
The African leaders who have met Hillary Clinton know what a disaster she is. At least with Donald Trump, they know he's been successful in international business, and in making America great again, he will make the partners for the African friends better partnerships. Donald Trump is all about win-win relationships.
The New York billionaire or the former Secretary of State, the differences are stark, most likely also on Africa.
Well, that's it for Across Africa this time. Thanks very much for watching us. Please do so again if you can. Take care.